My Catholic friends talk about prayer as a meaningful practice in their lives. Prayer strengthens their faith, and when they talk about prayer, I can see how it steadies them and keeps them connected. I want to practice like that. I'm an atheist. Is there a way for me to feel good about prayer? This question was posed to me by a congregant on my very first day of my very first professional ministry opportunity in a congregation. I was a summer preaching fellow. It was the first time I'd shown up in any congregation as a minister, so it was just a nice, light, easy start. Not a difficult question, right? And it turns out it was also this congregant's first day. He was a new visitor to the church because he had heard there might be space for him in Unitarian Universalism, and he was seeking community the same way many of us are seeking community when we first walk into a UU congregation, or if we're already UU, a new congregation in a new place. And this question remains one of my favorite questions I have ever been asked. Culture and language work together to give us shared understandings, right? And it's often a really useful function. If I invite you to gather for a potluck meal, because we are in the United States, you know that I am inviting you to bring food to share with others, right? You already know that you should either ask if there's a way to keep your dish warm, or you should assume that you can't, or that you need to bring your own crock pot. You know that you don't need to plan for what might be a normal full serving for everyone, because the whole gathered group is choosing from more options than you would offer to your family at home. And you know that if you haven't been assigned a type of a dish, there is a chance that you will be attending a potluck with 3 salads and 10 desserts. Sometimes it's fun to take that risk, and sometimes you know that you want a more robust meal, and so you give a little more direction, right? And so this term potluck originated in 16th century England. However, it is not a common term for this type of meal in the UK today. So if you invite that 25-year-old British couple who just moved into your neighborhood, they won't know all of these things that you assume. In fact, they will likely have a different understanding of the term. See, in the UK, the term potluck refers to taking a chance and hoping that what you end up with will be good enough. It's related, right? You can see how in our potluck meals we are taking a chance and hoping that what the collective brings is sufficient for a meal. But they're not using it just for a meal, so they might be confused. Sometimes they might think, leftovers, right? So for the most part, our shared understandings don't leave us confused when we have one common understanding. But sometimes the dominant culture defines a term in a way that does not work for us. In Unitarian Universalism, we sometimes reclaim and redefine a term. Sometimes we get to do that because we own that term as part of our history, or it has been freely shared. And sometimes we don't get to do that because it belongs specifically to a cultural experience that is not our own, or a religious experience that is not our own. And sometimes we just opt to leave it behind altogether, right? We're just like, this thing, as we understand it, doesn't work for me, and I'm leaving it at home. Or some of us find our way in, and others continue to struggle. And prayer is one of those terms that dominant culture defines and that many of us struggle to find our way into. See, our dominant culture, right, says that praying is how we talk to God. And that works for some of us, but it doesn't work for all of us. In conversations at the grocery store and on social media or in cards we send when a friend is injured, people will ask for and offer prayer for positive outcomes. Will you please pray for my sister who broke her leg last week? I'm praying that we have good weather for this picnic. And sometimes we participate not because we are necessarily pausing for an intentional moment of prayer, we might, but because it is a common way to express hope in our society. We move through these conversations often without giving them a lot of thought, and for many of us, they don't align with how we think the world works. So casual references to prayer might just pass us by. And very honestly, some of us have been very intentionally harmed by others' understandings of prayer. We've heard, "I'll pray for you," as a condemnation of some core part of our being. Or we've been told to pray for forgiveness, pray to be changed. This is especially true if we come from a background of abuse, either in a place of worship or in our family of origin, and for queer and trans people. And beloveds, that is an understanding of prayer that we should absolutely reject. Prayer that is used as a tool of manipulation or control is wrong, and we do not need to make space for it. Prayer is valuable when it helps you connect, and when it is used to tell you that you don't belong, or you are less than, or your ideas have less value, I invite you to show it the door, right? However, what I will also say is that when we let others tell us what prayer is, we do not give ourselves the opportunity to explore whether there might be a practice of prayer that can bring value to our lives, maybe regularly, or maybe just occasionally. Unitarian Universalist minister Eric Walker Wickstrom writes about understandings of prayer and specific practices in his book, Simply Pray. He invites his reader to, quote, "Pray without any preconceived notion of what you are doing or why. Simply do it and see what happens. Build your theology around your experience rather than the other way around." This is an invitation to all of us. No matter what we believe or don't believe about God, about what is or is not sacred, about ourselves and the world around us. Build your theology around your experience rather than the other way around. This is something we do in Unitarian Universalism all the time, right? Our theology, our big understanding of the world and what is sacred or not, serves how we move through and understand the world. And really, it does that in every faith tradition, right? I actually think that's kind of the beauty of the whole thing, because we have so many different expressions of practice and belief and faith, because we have so many different ways of relating to one another and the world. So Wickstrom's invitation really doesn't have any rules other than to do what feels authentic. Prayer, Wickstrom is telling us, can be a conversation. It can be a monologue, can be silent, can be still, can be music, can be movement. Prayer can happen on your own or with a gathered community. Prayer can be theistic, a connection with an understanding of the divine. Prayer can be non-theistic, settling inside you as a focused intention, not meant to be shared with anyone or anything beyond yourself. Wickstrom points us to secular practices that we might choose to call prayer. A lot of these things are interrelated, right? If we are looking to make them intentional parts of our UU faith. Gratitude journals can be expressions of prayers of thanksgiving. Keeping a moral inventory has parallels in prayers of confession. We can build and find value in all of this, even if we are not directing our prayer to anyone or anything. So Wickstrom has written down this framework, but the idea that prayer is more expansive than dominant culture often defines is not new to us. Listen to the words of this historic covenant by Universalist minister Griswold Williams. Love is the doctrine of this church, the quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Is there language in there that sounds familiar to anyone here? Very? What does it sound a lot like? It sounds, Jamie points out that it sounds like language we use, and Jamie, you are spot on, and that is exactly why I picked it. So we use a similar covenant, right? We use one written at a similar time by a Unitarian minister named James Villa Blake, and we call it our affirmation of faith that we say together on Sundays. But Williams' covenant uses a little bit different language, so that's why I picked it today. Right there in Williams' language is the line, service is our prayer. A reminder that sometimes prayer is the action we take. Perhaps prayer for you is attending No Kings protests or serving supper in Hale Hall on Tuesday nights. There is a quotation attributed to Frederick Douglass. So this one goes back even just a little bit further than Griswold Williams. That is, for many years I prayed for freedom, and I did not see anything change until I began to pray with my feet. Prayer can be protest. Prayer can be a walk in the woods. Prayer can be demanding your full humanity. One of my mentors, the Reverend Beth Banks, taught me to always build a pause into my transitions from one ministry task to another. And she didn't call this time prayer, but I will. The purpose, she explained, was to set some time to care for yourself between one challenging thing and another. It was important when shifting out of or into difficult conversations, like meeting with a bereaved family, care for yourself so you can care for others. But it was equally important in joyful work, like planning to celebrate high school seniors bridging to adulthood. A moment of intention lets you show up fully present to joy. As a chaplain in San Diego, my primary assignments were in the neonatal intensive care unit and on an orthopedic floor. Each day I went back and forth between incredibly sick babies and their parents and healthy adults who were there for elective joint replacements. I know, when you need a joint replacement, it doesn't feel super elective. Medicine calls it elective. I walked between 2 different hospitals on the same campus. And when I walked, I prayed. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. This practice of prayer for transition was already part of my life when I met Beth, but her teaching reminded me of its value even if our physical space does not change. So Eric Walker Wickstrom doesn't only write about ideas of prayer, he also wants to give some practical tools to those of us who are like, so what do I do with all this? And he writes about the role beads play in prayer practices in most major religious traditions. He created a Unitarian Universalist prayer bead practice that has a beautiful flexibility to it. A big bead invites us to center ourselves. 4 mid-sized beads invite us to practices of naming, knowing, listening, and loving. And in between all of these, spacing them out, small beads invite us into a breathing practice. The language we use is our own to choose, though there are some suggestions. We are invited to take as much time or as little time in this practice as we need in our day. And he invites us to try this practice all at once or broken up into sections throughout the day. And my favorite part of this is that he notes that these prayer beads can offer a steadying moment even outside of the practice he's written. He encourages his reader to tuck them into your pocket, take them out in a meeting, twirl them around on their string, or simply run your fingers over them. Some of you already know what that experience is like. In other words, Wickstrom is inviting us to use them as a fidget or a stim toy, because the ways that we regulate our bodies are also a form of prayer. Grounding and centering ourselves to be more present to what is going on around us, sometimes to even be able to stay in the room. I would like to invite you to explore your own relationship with this word, prayer. Is there space for it in a deep relationship with the divine, in a non-theistic practice of reflection and contemplation or movement? What might be your centering tool that you can return to in times of celebration or stress. I also put together a handout that you can grab after the service that outlines this prayer bead practice. I invite you to, if you would like to take that and try it, take it with you to a bead store. Take your careful time. Put your fingers on the beads. Find ones that feel good to you, that are in colors that you like, that are in shapes that you enjoy. Build a tool that cares for your own spirit. May it be so.